like the gates are open and everyone's flooding in.
Yeah, thanks to those of you that are joining us. It should be on your Easter holidays as well.
Absolutely.
Haven't started down south, have they? Well, they have for you, Lee, but they haven't for me or B.
Yeah, my kids are off. We're in full holiday mode now, almost.
Nice.
Easter eggs at the ready. We'll give it a minute or two. Say again?
You still do Easter eggs for yours?
Oh, always.
I was trying to negotiate doing Easter eggs for my kids. They looked at me like I just told them Father Christmas. Bear in mind, they're all like, you know, sort of late, well, older teenagers. But yeah, they were not impressed. I was like, okay, I'll get you Easter eggs. It's fine.
I hear you.
We still believe in the Tooth Fairy and Santa in our house.
I feel like you've just broken something to me, Lee, that I wasn't prepared for.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's like Santa's grotto at Christmas. You'll have to see it.
You do go for it in your place, don't you? You've got a lot of amazing decorations and yeah.
We have a 7-foot Santa that graces the hall.
So cool.
Right. How are we doing, Katie? We give it another minute or so?
Yeah, give it another minute. I think we've still got people joining.
Fantastic. Should we do our usual thing? And if you click on the chat functionality and tell us where you're dialing in from today, we'd love to see. Always some surprises in here. I'll get the ball rolling with Ludlow, Shropshire.
Oh yeah, of course. Where are we all dialing in from? It's always fascinating.
Shrewsbury, just down the road now.
Yeah, local. Oh, Amsterdam.
Netherlands. Great.
Oh, hi, Gibraltar. Thanks for joining, Zoe.
Fantastic.
I'm pretty sure that must be Zoe that I do know in Gibraltar. There can't be two Zoes in Gibraltar.
Paris, Texas. Oh, this is great.
Texas.
This is Brazil. Oh, that takes a surprise.
This is like, I reckon, the furthest net we've ever cast on these webinars.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed.
Fantastic. Hello, Daniela. Great to have you on board. Daniela definitely wins. Jane, absolutely. Okay. Should we get the ball rolling?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get started.
So yeah, a very warm welcome to our latest EX Space Expert Insights webinar. And today we're joined by someone I think you're very familiar with, Emma Bridger, co-founder of the EX Space, with myself, Lee Smith, and also Belinda Gannaway, who's co-written the book Employee Experience by Design, which really is the main focus for our discussion today. I'm not going to, I think most people are familiar with Emma, but Emma, I'm going to get you to introduce B, and B, if you would introduce Emma, we'll do it a little bit differently.
I love that.
Oh, that's got me on the hop straight away, because I wasn't expecting that. That's all good though. Yeah, it's weird. I'm in the hot seat today. I'm kind of taking a different role on. So let me introduce B. So wow, we met years ago, B, didn't we, when you were kind of in working for a consultancy, and I knew you was kind of a guru on all things like culture. And I think it's fair to say we always got on, and our paths crossed quite a few times over the years. And I remember I came over to meet you in Lewis quite a few years ago now, and we had a bit of a brainstorm, didn't we? And we were talking about how could we work together? What could we do? Because we really wanted to try and find something we could kind of work on together. And we were both talking a lot about employee experience, and it felt like that was the thing that we could kind of explore together. So I'm not really talking about you here, but anyway, I'll say what we did. I think that's okay. So we set up the first courses, didn't we? We had so much fun kind of developing those and designing those. And we were like, yeah, we're really something that we both felt really passionate about, really energized by. And, you know, B is someone who has an amazing background in, I say, all things culture and experience and design thinking as well, and team coaching. So it just seemed like a really good fit with what I do as well. And that's how it all started. And then approached the lovely people at Kogan Page and said, I think we might have an idea for a book. And they just jumped on it straight away. And here we are a few years later, or many years later, having just released the second edition, which seems quite mad, actually. It's just gone so quickly. So yeah, I mean, obviously be an amazing professional, but also really interesting outside of work. So I know you love your sailing, don't you, B? Which is interesting because like the thought of being on a sailboat scares the hell out of me personally. 2 lovely boys, lives in Brighton, really, really cute dog. Hopefully he's still alive. I've just said that and you go, actually, no, he died last year. What else? Because that's probably quite a good introduction, isn't it?
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lee. I love the
Fantastic. Thank you.
curveball. It really, really made me smile. So, one thing, I don't know what the chicken thing is, but the first time that this meeting that we had in Lewes, when Fathom had a meeting in an office in Lewes, and Emma came over from Hastings, there was something to do with chickens. Were you going to go and look at chickens?
No, my husband Ted drove me over and he said, I think, because we used to have chickens years ago, and he kind of tentatively said, I think I might go and there's someone that sells chickens. I might go and have a look. I said, yeah, but don't buy any chickens, because my husband I talk a lot about, he's neurodiverse, he's autistic and ADHD, and he's a little bit kind of just does crazy things sometimes. And anyway, by the time I got back from the meeting with B, he bought 6 chickens and all of the kit to go with it. There was like this massive chicken house. It was like nicer than our house, and all of the kit, because he's ADHD, when he gets into something, he really gets into it. So all the kit, yes, that was the story. I got home, I was like, oh my goodness, I've got home 6 chickens. So it was a chicken story. Well remembered.
I think most people on the call will probably know you really well. So probably not the chickens thing. Obviously, Emma and People Lab go way back. Emma is People Lab and People Lab, Emma and Wider. It's an amazing organisation, and now you're doing incredible things with the EX space with Lee, which is just great to see. Obviously, you bring the psychology to it, and the positive psychology, and not just to it from a theoretical point of view. You actually bring it to how you work and who you are and what it's like working with you, which is one of the joys of working with you. And one thing I did find, I'm sure most people know this about you, but it took me a little while to find this out. I don't know why, which was that, well, your love for music, your absolute passion for music, and also the fact you were in a band in the, I would say 90s. And
the 90s, yeah.
I'm going to get this wrong, but okay, shall I guess, like, try and see if I can remember the name? I'm going to say Formula One. Is that right?
Well done, yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad about that.
It's funny you say that, because I always think I'm like, go on about it all the time to people and go, yeah, I used to be in a band, like gives you some sort of kudos. But anyway, yeah.
Not to me, or else I wasn't listening, which is possible. But I remember hearing it after knowing each other and worked with each other for a little while and going, what? So
Absolute
check it out on
kudos,
Spotify.
Emma. It's fantastic. You should boast it from the hilltops. Thank you both. So we've got just under an hour. We're going to have there's no content to share, so this is a kind of unplugged conversational session. For those of you in the audience, you know the chat functionality is there. Please drop in questions. We're going to have lots of time for questions throughout the session. I'll get the ball rolling in a moment, but please bring your questions to the table as well, and we'll pick those up. Katie will keep a look out, and we'll pick those up as we go. I think we'll get stuck in. So if I'm going to get the ball rolling, and I'm going to pick on you first, Emma. So just tell us just a little bit about why you sat down. I guess this was, what was this, 2020? Was this in lockdown when you first came up with the idea? Why write the book?
So
what was you trying to get out of this?
We approached the publishers in 2019, and we were running the course for maybe a year or 2 by then, and just had really good feedback. And we just thought there's a real gap here for people that want to just roll their sleeves up and design great experiences. So it was less about the kind of the philosophy and the big picture, and more about the really practical tools to help people, move the dial. And that's kind of where it came from. And we developed the course, and we ran the course a number of times, had great feedback, and we just felt like, actually, wouldn't it be good to kind of put this into a book for people, so if they can't come on the course, they can, we put all our kind of, learning experience in the book. And that's where it came back. So I think we got the green light in 2019, then we started writing it in 2020 through lockdown, which was actually really good timing in the end, wasn't it, B? And then we launched the first edition at the very beginning of 2021, so we couldn't have any sort of get together or anything, so we did a Zoom launch party. And then I think we were both quite surprised that the second edition has come round so quickly, really. But I guess that's down to the fact this area, this discipline, this profession is moving really quickly. So there was actually, a lot of stuff to go in with the updates on the second edition.
I think, yeah, I mean, let's drill down into that a little bit, that sort of macro backdrop to this. So we obviously had lockdown and the pandemic and work from home and all those wonderful things, feels a lifetime ago, but just, 3-4 years ago. And that was a very specific time really for the world of work and how people and employees and their employers kind of connect. Just big picture, either of you, what's your reflections on that now, 3-4 years later, this journey we've been on in terms of the changing world of work? Was the pandemic the sort of revolutionary turning point, or are we sort of back to where we were now? Where are we at on that whole thing? Can I pick on you, B, to start with?
I think at the time we used to talk about the pandemic having fast forward a lot of the trends and the changes that were already happening in the workplace, that it was put them on super drive. And actually, I think, with hindsight, I still believe that's the case. Obviously, there were some things and there was some significant changes in the workplace that kind of were happening regardless and aren't sped up at all because of the pandemic, for instance, the impact of AI in the workplace. But a lot of other things, I think, that focus on empathic leadership, on the experience, on how do you create connection and belonging became, to the fore when people were distributed. And the ability to work remotely and all the different working patterns. I think a lot of those things were happening anyway, and the pandemic just supercharged them. And then there are new things that have been thrown into the mix as well. So I think, yeah, that thought that supercharging it still stands in my mind, plus throwing a few new things to the mix as well.
And thanks, B. And do you think now in 2024 we are in a broadly better place than we were back in 2019, or the
better
world of work?
In terms of the experience?
Has it changed for the better?
I think that's that's such a broad. We always come at, I'm coming at from a position of privilege. I work in knowledge-based industry. I get to choose where I work. Lots of people, not just in this country, but everywhere, don't necessarily have that privilege. And yes, I think employee experience has come to the fore for lots of organizations and it has improved for lots of people, but it's never going to be the case universally. I think what also has changed is this maturing approach to thinking about and managing and looking after experience and putting it to the top of the corporate agenda as well.
And Em, I'm going to pick on you now. So that you mentioned the changing face of the EX profession, if you like, as B just touched on. What do you think's changed? Are we winning that battle? Are we beginning to get respect and recognition in the boardroom?
I think it's really early days, right? And we all talk about this a lot, and many of us had really high hopes in terms of some of the changes we saw in the pandemic. For example, flexible working would continue, and we're seeing every day in the news there's another. Goldman Sachs have demanded people in the office like 5 days a week, and they're seeing a huge kind of exit of senior female personnel there, for example, because it's not working for them. So in some ways, there are some businesses that are dogmatically sticking to the ways they were working before, but as basically that's with the kind of knowledge worker sort of bias on it. When it comes to the EX profession, I think that it's funny when you kind of start these things, I don't think I'm particularly, big or clever or anything like that. And B and I have this kind of like shared passion for this area. We both, feel really passionate that people deserve to have a great time at work and all that good stuff. And I look back on it now and I realize, we were this, and I'm quite a modest person. Anyone that knows I'm very modest. And I feel really embarrassed saying this, but we were really ahead of the curve. I don't think we didn't appreciate that, which is why actually it was quite a lot of the conversations we were having were falling on deaf ears. In the early days, we were talking about the big shift from kind of, transactional HR that's done to people to this big shift of genuinely putting our people, human beings, at the front and center of everything we do and really dialing up that empathy. And there absolutely were a bunch of people, and quite a few of them on this call today, who got excited about it, and they are absolutely pioneers. They were kind of this same place that me and B were, but I don't think I'd really appreciated. Now I look back with hindsight and I'm starting to see the people talking about this stuff. I'm like, wow, we were talking about that like 5-6 years ago. And not just me and B, lots of people were, and I say a lot of them are on this call today. And I think that hindsight is a wonderful thing. And I think now we're starting to see that kind of classic kind of bell curve, whatever it is, you've got your kind of your early adopters, or your pioneers, your early adopters, etc. I think we're starting to see more and more people kind of waking up to this new way of approaching how we create a great experience at work, how we deal with people at work, and are kind of going, oh yeah, that makes sense. But what's really interesting for me, sorry, a bit of ramble here, is that what's really exciting for me is that I'm working with some great people that don't come from HR, and I love HR, and I've got some wonderful kind of friends and colleagues in HR, and the people that I love in HR are the people that are kind of like like me and B, that kind of got this stuff years ago. But I'm working with people like project managers who really get this stuff, people that come from customer experience, people from marketing, and I think it's so exciting that we're having all these kind of different perspectives and disciplines that are finally sort of looking at solving the people part of the puzzle when it comes to business. I think that's really kind of elevating and supercharging what we're doing. So I think that we're getting a bit of a snowball effect now. I think things are really starting to change. In the past sort of even 6 months, I see a different narrative on LinkedIn. I see people having different conversations, which is really exciting.
Yeah,
some thoughts on that.
I totally echo that. I think what's really changed since we wrote the first edition and the second edition is how much more there is joining up of different approaches and different perspectives. So from project management to agile to service design to working in a really connected way on customer experience and employee experience at the same time, as part of the same initiatives and the same evaluation and measurement approaches. All of that's coming together in a way that wasn't the case 3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So it's beginning to happen, and I think I very much share that view. This isn't your first book. Your first book was on employee engagement. Just talk about just briefly the relationship between those two, because that's quite important, isn't it? Employee experience on one hand and engagement on the other.
Yeah.
How do you summarize that relationship?
I like to keep things really simple, and I just talk about, if we design great experiences, then we'll kind of unlock engagement and all the wonderful business benefits that brings. And employee experience is not anything new. Employees have always had experiences. We talk about this in the book. This isn't new. But now we're just getting really intentional about designing those experiences that are right for our people, as well as the organization and the work they do. So that's the difference, really. I think in old days, we were kind of really shooting for how do we engage our people, and there is quite a lot of kind of intentional experience design in my first book, but without really calling it out explicitly. So I've been on a journey with all this as well, and I love that. I love being challenged and learning and developing myself. I'd hate to think I would stand still and go, right, this is the way we do it and that's it forevermore. I love the fact that we evolve. We go, actually, what we're talking about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is kind of the world's moved on since then. So I think it's really exciting. So for me, it's about, intentionally designing experiences that unlock and deliver engagements, however you choose to define them.
And that word, I always find slightly problematic, design or experience designer. We talk about being a designer. Now, in my old world of internal comms, design always, it relates first and foremost to kind of graphics and Adobe Illustrator and all those lovely things. But we're talking about a very different type of designer here. I mean, so who's the book aimed at, and how do people embrace that sense of being a designer of something if they don't first and foremost think of themselves as a designer?
Yeah, let me pick that up. I think you're right. It can be seen as you're talking about aesthetics, but design is actually about problem solving. It's about finding something that needs to be fixed or improved and starting with a human need at the beginning of the process rather than making assumptions. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about design. And I think it's so appropriate. As Emma said, employees are always going to have an experience. The question is it the experience that you want them to have? Is it an experience that's positive, rejuvenating, allows them to collaborate and innovate and wants to stay? All of the good stuff that we're aiming for. So that's why I think design is so appropriate. In terms of who the book is for, I don't know whether it was Emma or I who came up with this concept or this idea that when we wrote the first, we wanted to democratize it. I think the books on the market at the time that we wrote the first edition were really aimed at people leaders in knowledge-based organizations in lovely shiny offices and CBDs in big cities around the world. And Emma always talks about, not always, but often talks about, clients in the Foundry or you know, in factories, wherever it may be, and our desire to make sure that everybody can have as good an experience as possible. So the book, I would say, is for anybody who's got any impact in some sort of people team. So that's internal comms, HR, L&D, etc., etc. All of these roles, all of these teams have a massive impact, but actually leadership as well. Leadership, this is a leadership challenge. Employee experience and employee experience design has to be a collaborative effort across the organization. I think leaders and managers absolutely have to buy into this and understand their role in it and get behind it.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess when I first read the book, the one thing that really jumped out for me was design thinking. That's almost a centerpiece. I know we touch on agile and positive psychology and a whole host of other areas, which is fantastic. But really that sort of realization that there's this thing, design thinking, that frankly, you know, I'd been an internal communicator for 3 decades, and it took that book and meeting Emma and chatting about this to realize the huge potential that design thinking offers to really revolutionize how we do things in the workplace. Tell us a little bit more, just fundamentals for those that are on the call that aren't familiar, as I wasn't, with design thinking. What is that thing?
Emma, do you want to pick that up?
Oh, so you pick that up, because they're more your chapters. I mean, I can answer it obviously, but
fill in the gaps.
Design thinker, imposter syndrome, I am. You can for it.
So I love design thinking. Actually, it was a bit like you. I came across design thinking without being really cognizant of what it was that I was working with. So I was working in a social media consultancy at the time, and we were doing a whole bunch of work on marketing transformation to help marketing teams and marketing departments become much more agile, transparent, innovative, customer focuses, etc., etc. So I was introduced to this whole world of design thinking through some of my colleagues there. Now, design thinking is really a subset of human-centered design. So human-centered design kind of does what it says on the tin. We start with the human need. So rather than creating something because we think it would be a good idea to create it, human-centered design starts with, what is the problem that we're trying to fix, or the opportunity that we're trying to realize? Or put it in another way, put it through product management type of perspective, what is the value that we're trying to add here, rather than creating stuff for the sake of it? So human-centered design is a way of tackling that question. And what's nice about design thinking, it gives us some guardrails or some tools or some thinking. It has a lot of critics because it can be seen as being too methodical, which actually isn't. It's not a recipe. But for non-designers who are trying to take this human-centered approach to creating better experiences, it has some lovely guardrails and some lovely tools that you can implement. That's why I think it works so well in thinking about employee experience. And it's why it also sits so neatly alongside positive psychology, because it's inherently an optimistic approach to problem solving or realizing opportunities, because the assumption is you can always make things better. And for me, that really dovetails really neatly with positive psychology. Emma, what didn't I say?
No, that was great. I think, like you, I started using it when I worked with Capital One, like in about 2012, and I didn't know it was design thinking. And you know, and straight away, you know, had all these light bulb moments around, wow, this approach is just so different and so obvious. I can't believe I haven't been using these tools and techniques before, although some of it had felt quite familiar. And I think, and then obviously having as a kind of classic kind of, you know, woman of a certain age, imposter syndrome, whatever, you know, went back and got kind of qualified in design thinking, even though I kind of knew what I was doing. I thought, no, I need the qualification, you know. And the beauty though of what B and I have done with this book is, because no one's ever really used or gone out there and talked about this explicitly before, we've kind of come up with our own approach, which is using the best of design thinking, the best of service design, the best tools from positive psychology. We've kind of created this framework that kind of brings in what we've experienced. We've done, you know, used these tools a lot over the years. What we've found works really well when designing experiences. So it isn't just a kind of straight lift and shift from, you know, a design thinking sprint, if you like. We kind of actually brought to life, you know, the way that we've applied it in our work. So, you know, bringing in positive psychology, which is like a strength-based approach, which fits really well, bringing in the neuroscience to explain why some of the kind of tools work for people. And I always say, you know, the beauty of the framework that we've got is it is a framework. It's not a prescriptive, you know, you must do this and this. It's like this is kind of, if you follow this approach, you'll probably get a good outcome. And, you know, it kind of, what I love about it is you don't have, it's really simple. You don't have to overthink it. You haven't got to remember all these things, because the framework itself leads you to do the right thing. So, for example, at the very beginning, when you're in the scoping phase, you're talking about what's our ideal and how do we measure up? Well, the first kind of question, or second question there is, how do we measure up? Usually people go, we don't know. Right, we'll go away and find out, get some insights. It kind of leads you to do the right things without you having to kind of remember it all, you know, up front. So I think that's part of the beauty of the process. It's very simple to follow. It gets very complex because we're talking about people and human beings who are wonderful, complex, messy creatures. And that's the fun in it, actually, I think, trying to solve all these kind of amazing puzzles. I love that part of it. But it leads you to do the right things without you having to overthink it or it be overcomplicated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and that's the big thing that I took away really, is that, you know, it's an incredibly accessible, useful, practical toolkit. You know, it's a great book. There's lots of theory and it's all very robust. But actually, you know, for a practically minded communicator or experience focused individual, you can just get straight stuck into this stuff and make it work, which is what it's all about. So let's dive into the book. So you published the first issue 2021. Here we are, 2024, 3 years later. The world of work has kind of shifted. What have you added? What's changed since that first issue? What's the latest in employee experience by design? What have you added or changed or rewritten?
Do you want me to jump in? Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, that was, like I say, you know, it was quite a quick turnaround to write a second edition, but it felt like, you know, it wasn't going to be a problem because there was so much. I mean, in fact, we had a problem keeping to the kind of amount you're supposed to change for a second edition. We probably could have written a whole new book because there was so much we wanted to include in it, wasn't there, B? We're like, how are we just going to stick to, you know, the kind of the guidelines you give them? I think one of the things I kind of would draw out is the EX archetypes work, which obviously you're very familiar with, Lee, which was really about a couple of years ago. You know, we're talking about the developing profession of EX. And I mean, I do get on a bit of a soapbox about this because I'm all about accessibility and I want people to be able to do this stuff without having to have a degree in it. But equally, I don't want to undermine the sorts of skills and capabilities you need to do this well. And I don't, you know, it's a little bit like internal comms, right? You know, for many years, people did internal comms on the side of a desk sort of thing, or, you know, whatever role you had, or you can just do internal comms. I just don't think we'd have the same approach to other disciplines. You know, like you wouldn't give your numbers to someone that wasn't a qualified accountant. You wouldn't, you know, you want people to have the right background, skills, capability. But when it comes to the people side of the business, often we just go, oh yeah, you can do that. And I think we're missing a massive trick here. We just need to be, it's not about making it inaccessible for individuals to get into this sort of stuff. It's really about how we can professionalize this world and just give it the gravitas it needs and just be really honest about, to be good at this stuff, it's a number of things you really need to get your head around. So a couple of years ago, we did a piece of research. We went out to a bunch of kind of practitioners who were doing some, you know, great work in the field and interviewed them, qualitative research, and sort of said, well, what is it you're doing and how can we learn from you? And we came up with the 4 EX archetypes, which kind of sum up the sorts of work that people were involved with, and strengths, which we found the strengths were way more important than skills. And the skills, you know, there's no way anybody, I think, would ever have all the sorts of skills you need. So part of the strength is that self-awareness to go, I'm actually really good at this bit, but I probably need to get some help with that bit, you know, whatever it might be. So the 4 EX archetypes are the architect, which is kind of the big picture thinker, setting the blueprint, the strategy. You've got EX designer, who are kind of down in the detail of redesigning specific experiences, like onboarding is the one people go to. You've got your EX planners, who are sort of sitting in a more traditional kind of model of like maybe they're setting L&D or internal comms or talent. And they're going, I've got to take the kind of the strategy or the blueprint, as we call it, and translate that into my local plans. How am I going to do that? And then you've got the EX builders who are actually on the sort of front line, actually delivering these experiences we're talking about. And they all require different things, right? So if you're kind of in that EX architect space, you know, you need to be able to be a strategic thinker. You've got to be really good on the kind of the overall measurement, see the end-to-end experience. You know, you might not ever get near redesigning an actual onboarding experience, but you need to kind of have appreciation of that. Whereas if you're in that kind of like that business unit where you are working on a specific experience, you need quite a lot of different skills. So that's where that came from, and that was a really fascinating piece of research. And you know, it's the beginning, really. So it's the first time we've done this, first time I think anyone's done this in the world. And we're really up for kind of, you know, iterating. We live in our brand here, iterating this, experimenting with it, and you know, building on it and kind of taking it forward. So we're really up for that conversation. So that's one of the first things I kind of draw on. The other area, I suppose, is the EX Lens, which was an update on the Magica model from the first edition. So the EX Lens was based on 15 years of qualitative data from the best experience conversations that we gathered from people saying, tell us about a time we had a great experience at work. And you know, we add to that data all the time. So we felt like it was just, let's revisit the data. And there are a couple of new themes that have come out from more recent data. And surprisingly, from the pandemic, I think trust and belonging are the two that have come out that weren't really so much there before. So again, that's something that we continually go back to. Every year we revisit the latest best experience data we've got, and we say, does that still feel right? Is that still relevant? So, you know, we're not just kind of going, there's the model, that's it, done. We're kind of continually iterating. So those are the two things I'd pull out. B, what about you?
Oh, I'm torn on which to say. Obviously, we've got new tools in there. We've got new case studies. I guess just pulling out two bits for me would be the EX maturity model and the measure. So this is something that we worked with collaborators from the first edition. We worked on the development of the EX maturity model or EX maturity path between the two editions, really looking at what is different in different organizations at different stages of their maturity of their approach to employee experience. And we've been able to sort of categorize that into, you know, whether there's a forming approach, a performing approach, or a transforming approach. And what we can see in that model, that there are kind of like 4 areas or 4 capabilities, if you like, that will really dictate where an organization is. And the first is focus, how they choose where to focus their efforts and their activities to improve employee experience, and how they go about making that decision. The other is mindset. So are we still talking about in HR terms about processes, or are we talking in experience terms around people and experience? Then the third element or capabilities around involvement. So, you know, this comes right back to Emma's first book on employee engagement. You know, how do you involve collaborators across the business, because employee experience is a team sport, but also how do you work with your end users, with your employees? So don't design for your employees, design with them. So how are you doing that on a consistent, ongoing basis and making that successful? And the fourth element is impact. So if you've defined your focus correctly in the first instance, you should have an idea of why you're focusing there and what impact you want to achieve and how you're going to evaluate it. So the impact or evaluation measurement piece is massively important. And that actually points at probably my second favorite bits of the book, that in the new edition, which is a case study from NASA, which I was looking at again today. It is so rich. There is so much in it. It's so beautifully constructed how they go about this. And what I love is how they draw together the impact on employee experience, customer experience, and also service health, actually the quality of what they're delivering. And they've looked at specific metrics throughout that around equity. And they've actually, the way they're looking at equity is they've embedded the organizational values into how they measure across those 3 dimensions, and equity is sort of the primary value of the organization. It's just such a rich piece of work. I've done it a total injustice trying to describe it like that, but for me it just sums up so much about the how we are maturing with our approach to employee experience, and how the different bits of the organization are joining together to really create an impact.
Thank you, B. I think, yeah, I mean, the case studies, we're big fans of case studies at the EX space, and you know, I think they're a fabulous way of bringing theory to life and just showing the sort of real world reality check of things. There was one that jumped out for me, which was BAE Systems, which maybe I can pick on you to sort of summarize. But from my internal comms days, you know, we spent many years, indeed we're still going on about this, you know, who owns internal comms? Why don't we have a seat at the table? Which function should be in charge of IC? You know, 2 decades at least we've been talking about that, and I see the similar sort of patterns here with EX a little bit. You know, who needs to own this? And as you've already touched on, the multidisciplinary nature of it. And I think BAE had quite an interesting solution there, Em.
Yeah, definitely. And they're, you know, I really hold them up as you know, an exemplar of just, sorry, jumping around a little bit. So I had a really great conversation with Bruce Daisley, who I know is very, very dear friend of yours as well. He's on our EX Space Advisory Board, and he was asking me about companies that are really great at this versus individuals. So I had this like massive light bulb moment, thinking actually, it isn't the companies that are really good at it. It's them having like a few people or many people inside who are really passionate pioneers around this stuff. And I was thinking about how I've seen over the years companies kind of go from almost hero to zero when it comes to the way they you know, develop, nurture, design their experience, their culture. And some companies at some point are doing amazing things. You go, wow, they're fantastic, and then change of personnel at the top, or new people come in, and suddenly they go backwards, right? And it just really struck me. I thought, wow, this is a really interesting point. And I think BAE Systems are an example of a huge, complex, traditional organization where it's hard to get stuff done. And they had this bunch of just amazing people who came along to a few webinars that we did years ago. So Trina Cross, Alison Ramsey, a few others, and they were just like, something spoke to them and they were like, we need to do this differently. And they, you know, it's down to the passion and the tenacity of those individuals. They've gone from being, you know, a few people with some crazy ideas to we should do some employee personas, which is where it started with BAE, to now they have a completely different way of doing things in BAE. And they're like, what, 80,000 more, Katie will probably tell me, people all over the world. If they can do it, I think any organization can. And they've been on this journey of like, you know, started off with developing behavioral personas with them, and then using them to kind of redesign various experiences such as onboarding and exit, and then developing this, you know, this kind of journey of like, actually they're a really, really small EX team. They have EX and listening that kind of work together. There's like a handful of them, and they've got this massively complex organization. It's very traditional. And, you know, they've worked really hard to kind of come up with a different way of doing things, a model. They've got like centers of excellence. They've got this massive community of practice now. We've kind of trained up all these people around the world to use these tools. And once people use these tools that are in the book, it's not a hard sell, because it's a little bit like anyone that's ever gone through coaching, right? Anyone that's gone through being trained as a coach, it trains itself. Because when you get a big coach and you go, wow, this is really powerful, I'm up for this. And this is the same sort of you know, impact here. The minute people start using these tools to redesign experience or design experience, they get it straight away. It's not a hard sell. So the tenacity of that very small team of wanting to do something differently, you know, over probably about 3 years it's taken them. But for a big, complex organization where there's a lot of governance, a lot of risk aversion because of what they do, there has to be, right? And I think now, you know, for me, part of the kind of the success of that story is they are inundated with requests for help on various work streams, projects, products they're launching. They're getting pulled in all sorts of directions, that everybody wants a bit of this. And the language has changed. The way they approach the people side of the business has changed. So that, you know, real success story there.
Fantastic. Thank you. I noticed, Katie, I'm going to come to you for a few questions. We've had quite a few come in. Let's take some from the floor. Before we do that, Emma mentioned a couple of things, the EX archetypes, and Katie's dropped a link to our white paper, EX archetypes white paper, in the chat. Same with the EX lens white paper. So if you're interested in either of those and digging a bit deeper, please have a look at those links. There's also a link to the book for those of you that want to get yourself a copy. Katie, what have we had come in from the floor?
Yeah, we've had a few questions actually. I'm just going to make in advance. My internet seems to be a bit whiffy, so if it goes off again, I'll turn my camera off. But it seems to be holding up. So the first one is from Nicola. With the introduction of AI and future generations, how do you see employee experience changing, both the positive and the negative?
Shall I go?
For that one?
I'll let you go first.
I mean, I as a nerd, I remember years ago I studied psychology. I remember learning about neural networks. It just seems like so. I'm showing my age now. It's so like a future state, and here we are, right? So I think that I still go back to the point that, you know, most organizations I work with can't even tell me who actually works for them, right? So I think it's a huge opportunity with AI to improve our experience. Imagine if, you know, it gets to the point where it's genuinely able to be, let's talk about ChatGPT, because lots of different sorts of AI, but ChatGPT, using ChatGPT as your personal assistant, so we can really focus on the human side, you know, the bits that we're really good at, right? As human beings, what are the bits that it can't do for us? So that kind of, that, you know, collective sense making and problem solving and all the really cool stuff. So I think there's a massive opportunity for it to improve the experience at work. But I just think we're further off than we think we are. I've seen you know, lots of tech solutions that I think will be really, really exciting. But I think at the moment, they kind of, when you get behind the scenes, you get under the bonnet, if you like, you go, oh, okay, it's not quite what I thought, not quite where I thought it would be. I think they will get there. And I think, you know, the idea is, for me, we talk a lot about the landscape in the book, the landscape of EX, trying to make sense of it. And we've got the hygiene experiences, your life cycle experiences, your everyday experiences, then your kind of your individual mindset and all that kind of good stuff. And I think for me, the biggest opportunity with AI is to kind of finally sort out those really rubbish hygiene experiences that are really clunky, that if they're not there, they cause a lot of pain. Right. So if you haven't got your tools for day one, if you can't swipe into the building, if you're not getting paid on time, your pay slip's not coming through, or if you've got to search endlessly to find the information that you need, if you've got to go, I mean, Riff Riff Ahmed from Bupa, who's again on the advisory board for the X Space, he, amazing guy, did a webinar with us a few months ago. He talked about, you know, moving to consumer grade tech, which I think is where AI comes in. So imagine having that slick consumer grade experience inside organizations. That's really exciting. So I think for me, the first port of call is to use AI and tech to help us solve the hygiene experiences. So I say, you know, you're going onto your intranet, your portal, you haven't got to search for 10 different places to book leave or to, you know, record absence or to performance, you know, fill out a performance management form. It's just, it's easy, it works, it's slick. That for me is where I think we'll see some real value in the early years. That's kind of my initial take on it. But I do think we're further off than we think we are, because we've got all these legacy systems inside organizations that don't speak to each other yet. And you've got those companies that have got big budgets and the right tech teams that can start to kind of plug them all into each other. I'm not talking tech here, to give that more seamless experience. But, you know, I go back to that point that B made about, we do get a little bit knowledge worker bias here. And I've worked with companies, I won't name them, but some of them, you know, the tech is literally, it's so clunky, so outdated. I mean, we worked with a company a couple of years ago. I won't say what sector they were in, but they were, you know, really wanted to kind of uplift or to design great experiences, and they had the right intention. Their tech was so outdated, they couldn't even get pay slips to people on time. You know, that's where they were. And this is very recent. So I think there are a lot of companies who are, it's going to take them a long time to get there. So that'd be my ramble on that. B, I'm sure you've got stuff to add.
Yeah, I'm going to try and knit together the two bits of Nicola's question, one around sort of multiple generations in the workforce and one around AI. In the book, we talk about kind of three domains that have the biggest impact on the employee experience. So the organization, the people that you work with, and the nature of the work. And I think, Nicola, your question probably touches on the people that we're working with as well as the nature of the work. If I were to look at the sort of like the Venn diagram of what connects that multiple generations in the workforce and AI. So if I take that first, multiple generations in the workforce, that is fascinating, and it needs attention and care. So I'm not going to give you a quick answer, this is what it means, but you know, what we need to do is to really think deeply about it and explore it. I think I'm fascinated between the two editions about the ongoing rise of employee activism and the ongoing impact of generations choosing with their feet to work with organizations where their values are most closely aligned and to stand up and have an opinion about things they disagree with. Now, there's a generational difference in terms of how that is expressed in the workplace. I think there's some interesting conversations. That's just one touch on the multi-generational workplace. I think it's fascinating and needs care and attention. So if I were to come to the second bit of that Venn diagram around AI, I think AI impacts both the work that you do and also who you're doing it with, because actually when your colleague is an AI co-pilot, we need to think very, very carefully about how we support our team members, our employees, and our more distributed workforce to work in that way with these new AI co-pilots. We are so lucky in the book to have some amazing contributors, and Dr. Bonnie Chiok is one of those. She's from AstraZeneca. She's written a brilliant piece for us about the future of learning in the workplace and learning in the flow of work. And she talks about sort of 4 or 5 key skills areas that we really need to equip and enable our employees to develop these skills in themselves to be able to work successfully with AI co-pilots and do that in a healthy, positive experience for them. And what's interesting is that a lot of them are quite, I would say almost, they are the skills and attitudes and behaviors around design as well. So she talks about big picture thinking, flexibility, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, always challenging the status quo. She talks about empathy. She talks about relationship building, caring, listening. So there's so many overlaps between the sort of the culture that we are trying to create, the design culture to enable better experiences, and then how we need to equip people to work confidently in this new environment where AI is potentially your colleague as much as the human being at the other end of the computer, if that makes sense. So that's my probably rambling attempt to address those 2 issues that Nicola, you put together. So thank you for the challenge.
Lovely, thank you so much. Okay, where were we on these questions? So next question from Roxanne. Do you feel the through line from agile project managers, CX and marketing is down to the mindset similarities, so customer centricity, empowerment, transparency, etc., or are there other themes between them that you've observed?
Ooh. I'm going to, I'm gubbling on the last question, so I'm going to go quickly. We borrow and steal with pride from a range of different disciplines and methodologies, and we reduce our 3 core principles of EX design down to creativity, curiosity, and experimentation. If you took agile principles and the values of agile and you boil them right down, you get down to a very similar place. So I do agree that the mindsets across these disciplines there's a lot of overlap in a very healthy way. But is there more than that? I suppose there must be, because if mindset translates into behaviors and that translates into tools and principles and practices, and again, there is going to be overlap, but I'm not going to try and do justice to that sort of bigger piece. So the answer is there more than just mindset that's an overlap between these different approaches? Yes.
Thanks, Bea. If you don't mind, I'll skip through and let you kind of answer them because we've got loads of questions still. Is that okay? Or did you have anything you wanted to add?
That's fine. Fine.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you. Okay. Next question from Jen. Any thoughts on targeting remote employee engagement specifically? Well, we also try to create commute-worthy experiences in office. How do we maintain an overall culture rather than a remote culture and in-office culture?
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a tough one. It's something I was talking about. We were working with Charlotte. It was a large central government body before the pandemic on this very topic. This is not new. Okay, so I think it's and you know this. I know you know this. It's not new. For me, it comes back to the principles that we go through in the book of genuinely using the framework, the design thinking framework we use is really about not making assumptions and not trying to solve it for people, like involving the end user in solving this problem for you, because we can all have a view on what might work, but actually involving the right stakeholders and the right employees in solving this problem is where you're going to get the right solution. And it sounds really obvious, but I've just seen so many organizations try to sort of chuck, like I've seen companies that send out quite it's not insulting, but life will be better because we've sent you like have a cup of tea on us. It's a tea bag and a packet of biscuits because you're a remote worker. I just think that's I think it is a bit insulting. It's like, is that really going to make me feel like I belong? You sent me a tea bag and some biscuits, So for me, it goes back to basics, solve the problem with the people it's impacting, spend time getting insights from them. We talk a lot about the way you ask a question is critical. So if you say, hey, tell us what you need to not feel, isolated when you're working from home, you'll probably get a very different answer than if you ask the question in a way which is, when you're working remotely and you feel part of what's going on for you? Or tell me about a time when you were working remotely and you felt like you were part of something. So asking the question is really critical to unearth the right insights as well, which we talk about a lot in the book. So that'd be probably my not massively helpful answer, but I'm sure people have a more helpful answer than I'll come up with there.
No, it's don't make assumptions. Don't think you know the answers. Exactly what you said. Otherwise, you get down the ping pong pizza and parties. I stole that from somebody I heard last week. That does not make for a happy workforce or happy employees. It does not create connection, collaboration, all the other stuff. If you want to find out what does, ask your people and ask them in a way that you explore the issue in a way that they can actually explore it and tell you stories and give you the answers rather than making it difficult for them.
Brilliant answers. Thank you both. Okay, from Helen, love the archetypes. Just wonder what routes people moving into EX roles move in from. And are you seeing more EX roles emerge?
Yes, definitely see more EX roles emerge for sure. I think people come from all sorts of weird and wonderful places. I don't think there is a route in yet. I mean, we work with a lot of the people we work with actually get in touch because I say, I've just been given this EX role, or I've just fallen into this EX role and I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I've no idea where to start. Can you help me? So, you know, people are coming from the traditional sort of more traditional HR backgrounds for sure, but also from internal comms, from marketing. I'm working with a brilliant, I probably shouldn't say where they're from, but a really brilliant individual. And if she's on the call, she'll know she'll know I'm talking about, who's a project manager. And she absolutely gets this, and she's from a project management background, you know. So in fact, I've worked with a couple of project managers thinking about it, which has surprised me. I wouldn't have pegged project managers as being like really kind of getting this stuff. Some people have come from customer experience, so I don't think it really matters as long as people have the right mindset and are willing to develop the skills and capabilities to get good at this stuff. So come in it with that kind of, I'm here to learn, not I know this all already kind of attitude. So yeah.
Totally agree. B, did you want to add anything to that, or shall I go on to the next one? Perfect, thank you. I think this is probably the last one we'll have time for. So, oh, actually, and I think it's the last question, so that's really good. We did that well. So this is from Merca. How would you say the EX archetypes inform the way in which independent EX practitioners work with clients? It's likely that we have to have or develop strengths in all those areas.
Yeah, I mean, what we found is that people don't sit neatly in one area yet. I think they will as the profession matures. I think we will see teams being built out and we'll see, you know, recruiting for more kind of specific skills and strengths in different areas. So, you know, for example, you know, someone coming in that's a really amazing kind of EX designer might have quite a different kind of background, someone that would be better at that kind of architect level, who's really good at the sort of stakeholder management, politics, etc. I think at the moment, though, the reality is most people we speak to probably wear all four hats at various times, but with a mind to, yes, it's because we're an immature profession, but we want to really professionalize this, and we know that actually the skills at different parts of the different elements of the archetypes, that makes sense, require different things. So let's work towards that. So I'd say that's kind of where we're going. And you know, there's a whole bunch of sort of skills and strengths that are needed. The strengths, obviously, you know, you can develop those. Just you might be lower on empathy. You can build your empathy. The skills side of things, you know, the expectation is not that you'd always tick all the boxes on the skills. It's like having that self-awareness to say, actually, I need to bring in a really kind of, you know, amazing analytics person, analytics team to do that analytics piece and do that kind of really kind of, you know, very complex. I mean, I have a background, I started off as a psychologist. I used to lecture in stats and research psychology, and I would definitely pull in someone that has a really kind of pure analytics background to help me kind of figure the sort of that side of things out, you know. So I think we underplay the sort of level of skill we need to do this stuff well. So it's just knowing where you need to pull in different people to help you to do this.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for your questions. Few minutes left. I'm going to just sort of bring us bang up to date then. So, you know, the economy is quite tough at the moment out there. Gartner published a report very late last year saying that 2024, a lot of organisations around the world are going to be pulling back their investment in employee experience. What are you guys seeing? What are you seeing out there at the moment? In you know, what's the reality check? Is that having an impact?
I would say it is, and I think it's partly a budget issue, and there is also some concern around optics. in an organization where you're potentially restructuring, or, you know, where there are potentially, you know, not great news stories happening, EX is happening. A great experience-focused organization will be managing those change scenarios with a human-centered lens. So that is creating activity. But the sort of more additional, the uplifting, human-centered design approach to improving experience from an optics lens, I think is potentially seen as a little bit problematic in some organizations. But where I'm seeing, love to know, Emma, what you're saying, what I'm seeing is sustained, if not increased, investment in leadership and management development, because whatever's happening in organizations, whatever change they're going through, to thrive going forward, organizations know that they need better leadership and better management in order to enable that micro level employee experience. So I'm not seeing any significant downturn in investment there. I'm seeing that sustained, if not increasing. But from an optic lens, it's not necessarily below the waterline, but it's visible. But there's a concern about how it's portrayed. It's not seen as too, I don't know what the word would be, big, bold, elaborate, celebratory. It's, you know, it's happening, but there's an optics consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I've been around this loop probably 3 times before, and you know, it's disappointing, but it's always the people side of, you know, the budgets, the expenditure that gets cut first, right? It's like, and yet we still see, you know, companies flying in, you know, sports stars to speak at the leadership event for like half an hour. I just think it's crazy, and or spending, you know, 6 figures plus on a survey that doesn't go anywhere. And I was saying to someone last week, I said, just do your survey every other year. By the time you get around to sort of actioning your survey, it's almost like time for the next one anyway. Just do it every other year and use that budget in the intervening years to do something with the results, right? I just think it's very short-sighted. And those companies that are, you know, observing the herd and doing the opposite, right? They're the ones that will survive. They're the ones that will come out of this really strong for sure, because they haven't followed the path most trodden and gone, oh well, we haven't got a lot of money at the moment. We know on the optics, I completely agree with you, B. We'll just cut budget on all that side of things. The ones that kind of observe the herd and do the opposite, they're the ones that will have the competitive advantage.
Fantastic. Last question. So looking ahead, your kind of hopes and dreams for EX as a profession and generally for the world of work. If we were to come back in 5 years' time, you're hopefully on issue 3 by then. What are you hoping for? What does that look like? What could the next 3 to 5 years bring?
I'll go for it. I absolutely loved working and collaborating with all of our contributors, and Bonnie, and also Rob Baker as well, who talks in the book about the personalization of work. And again, we talk about these kind of 3-legged stools, or the nature of the work, the organization, the people you work with. But I think what's so fascinating about using data and really thinking about people's experience of work and of the work, once you can start to personalize the work that people are doing, people will stay longer with you, because they'll be hitting all of those core motivating factors and all of those elements of the EX lens that we talked about earlier. So I really hope the time has come for that, because it just leans into what people want and also the need for agility in organizations. So I'd love to see more of that, and that really maturing and taking hold.
Feels like we're at a pivotal point, doesn't it, Em? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, the profession has matured, and and it's kind of absolutely the way that we do the people side of things in businesses is to put them at the front and center. We treat, you know, the Gallup quote B and I use a lot, which is, you know, employees have become the consumers of the workplace. We finally live in that, right? We're treating our people in the same way that customer experience, you know, treat customer are passionate about and interested in and want to do the right thing by customers. We've finally got that mindset inside organizations. You know, you hear this kind of thing bandied around, our people are our best assets, but it's all talk, right? Because if they really were, we wouldn't do the stuff that we do to them. Not we, obviously we're all brilliant, but you know, and I think finally seeing companies go, we've woken up, we've smelt the coffee or whatever it is, and we are genuinely putting our people front and center, and it's all about, you know, taking that human-centered design approach to, you know, design and deliver great experiences for people, so people have the opportunity to come to work and have some really good days, not every day, but have some really good days and go, you know what, it's pretty good work in here. That would be my kind of dream for the future.
I'd raise a glass to that. Fantastic. Yeah, sounds good. Very exciting times. Well, we've come to the end. I think we're just coming up to the hour now. Thank you, B. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Katie, for facilitating. And thank you all for dialing in and joining us today and for your great questions. Go back over the chat. The links are in there to the book. If you're interested in the book, there's a 20% discount you can get right now. Make sure you use that. And until next time, please keep an eye on our socials. We've got more of these webinars coming up. And if you heard about this one, I'm sure you'll hear about the next. But thank you all for your time and energy today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it.